Story 1: The Uninvited Guest. Sarah had always loved her birthdays. Every year, her parents would throw her a big party, complete with cake, presents, and all her friends gathered around to celebrate. But her 16th birthday was different. Her parents decided to rent a large, old-fashioned house in the countryside for the weekend, thinking it would be a fun and unique experience. They had no idea that this birthday would be one that Sarah would never forget, no matter how hard she tried. The house was massive, with creaky wooden floors, long dark hallways, and rooms that seemed to have been frozen in time. It was the kind of place that looked like it had its own secrets, where every corner held a mystery. Sarah's friends arrived in the late afternoon, excited to explore the place and start the party. They were particularly drawn to the basement, which was filled with old furniture, dusty trunks, and other forgotten relics of the past. As they wandered around, one of Sarah's friends, Emily, found an old mirror tucked away in a corner, its surface tarnished and dull. "Hey, look at this," she called out, wiping away the dust to reveal the glass beneath. The mirror was large, with an ornate frame that looked like it belonged in a different century. Sarah, curious, joined her friend, peering into the mirror. For a moment, everything seemed normal, just their reflections staring back at them. But then, out of the corner of her eye, Sarah saw something move, a shadowy figure standing just behind them. She turned around quickly, but there was no one there. The room was empty except for them, and their other friends, who were busy exploring other parts of the basement. "Did you see that?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking slightly. "See what?" Emily replied, looking around with a puzzled expression. Sarah shook her head, trying to brush off the unease creeping up her spine. "Never mind," she muttered, stepping away from the mirror. But as they moved to leave the basement, Sarah felt a cold breeze brush past her, even though there were no windows or doors open. The feeling lingered with her for the rest of the evening, an unsettling sense that they were not alone in the house. The party continued upstairs with music, laughter, and the usual chaos of teenagers having fun. But as the night wore on, strange things began to happen. Lights flickered, doors creaked open on their own, and cold drafts swept through the rooms. Sarah's unease grew with every strange occurrence, her eyes constantly darting to the shadows, expecting something or someone to jump out. Just as they were about to cut the birthday cake, the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. The only light came from the candles on the cake, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Must be the storm. One of her friends said, trying to sound nonchalant, though the fear in their voice was evident. As they fumbled for flashlights and phones, trying to figure out what to do next, Sarah noticed something strange. The mirror from the basement had been brought upstairs and was now propped against the wall, reflecting the dim light of the candles. But what caught her attention wasn't the mirror itself, it was the figure standing in it. A tall, dark figure stood in the reflection, its features obscured by the darkness, but its presence unmistakable. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the figure, paralyzed by fear. The room fell silent as the others noticed it too, their faces pale and eyes wide with terror. Who is that?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. No one moved. No one spoke. They were all frozen, watching as the figure in the mirror began to move, slowly stepping closer, its form growing clearer with each step. It was no longer just a shadow, it was a man, his face gaunt and hollow, his eyes empty and cold. He reached out towards them, his hand pressing against the glass as if trying to break through. Sarah snapped out of her trance, grabbing the mirror and hurling it to the floor. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, the sound echoing through the silent house. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the lights flickered back on, and the house returned to normal, the strange presence seemingly gone. But the damage was done. The party ended abruptly, the guests too shaken to continue. Sarah's parents tried to comfort her, but she couldn't shake the image of the man in the mirror, his hollow eyes staring into her soul. That night, as she lay in bed, Sarah heard soft footsteps outside her door, followed by a quiet knock. She held her breath, fear gripping her heart. The door slowly creaked open, and in the dim light of the hallway she saw him, the man from the mirror, standing in the doorway watching her. Sarah screamed. and the man vanished, leaving her alone in the dark. But she knew he was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to return. Her 16th birthday would haunt her for the rest of her life, a reminder that some things should never be disturbed. Story 2: The Haunted Clown. Ben had never liked clowns. There was something about their painted faces, wide grins, and oversized shoes that made him uneasy. So when his parents hired a clown for his 10th birthday party, he wasn't exactly thrilled. But his parents insisted, saying it would be fun and that all his friends would love it. Reluctantly, Ben agreed, hoping the day would go by quickly. The party was set up in their backyard with balloons, streamers, and a large tent where the clown would perform. Ben's friends arrived, and soon the yard was filled with the sounds of laughter and excited chatter. But Ben couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in his stomach. When the clown arrived, Ben's unease turned into full-blown fear. The clown, who introduced himself as Mr. Jolly, was anything but jolly. His face paint was smudged, giving him a sinister, almost grotesque appearance. His smile was too wide, his teeth yellowed and crooked, and his eyes, those cold, dark eyes, seemed to stare right through Ben. The other kids didn't seem to notice anything strange. They laughed at Mr. Jolly's tricks and jokes, enjoying the show. But Ben couldn't join in. He kept his distance, watching the clown with a growing sense of horror. There was something wrong with him, something evil. As the party went on, Mr. Jolly's behavior became increasingly odd. His jokes grew darker, his tricks more twisted. At one point, he pulled out a balloon and began twisting it into the shape of an animal. But when he finished, it wasn't a dog or a cat, it was a twisted, deformed creature that looked like it belonged in a nightmare. Ben's friends laughed nervously, but Ben knew something was terribly wrong. He wanted to run, to get as far away from Mr. Jolly as possible. But before he could move, the clown caught his eye and smiled, a smile that sent chills down Ben's spine. "How about a special trick for the birthday boy?" Mr. Jolly said, his voice low and menacing. Ben shook his head, backing away, but the clown stepped closer, pulling a deck of cards from his pocket. "Come on, don't be shy," he said, his smile widening. Ben's friends urged him on, and despite his fear, Ben felt pressured to go along with it. He took a card from the deck, his hands trembling. Mr. Jolly's eyes never left his, and as Ben revealed the card, the clown's smile faltered. "That's not right," Mr. Jolly muttered, his expression darkening. "Let's try again." He shuffled the cards and had Ben pick another. But again, the clown's smile faded as he saw the card. Ben didn't understand what was happening, but he knew one thing for sure: Mr. Jolly was no ordinary clown. The clown grew frustrated, his cheerful facade crumbling. He grabbed Ben's wrist, his grip tight and painful. "Pick another," he demanded, his voice now a low growl. Ben tried to pull away, but the clown held on, his eyes burning with anger. The other kids began to back away, sensing that something was very wrong. The air grew cold, and the once bright and festive atmosphere turned dark and oppressive. "Pick another," Mr. Jolly shouted, his voice echoing through the yard. Ben screamed, wrenching his arm free and running towards the house. The other kids scattered, leaving the clown standing alone, his expression twisted with rage. Ben's parents rushed out, confused and concerned, but by the time they reached the yard, Mr. Jolly was gone. The rest of the day was a blur for Ben. His parents tried to reassure him that it was just a misunderstanding, that the clown had been playing a prank. But Ben knew better. He had seen the darkness in Mr. Jolly's eyes, felt the evil that radiated from him. That night, Ben couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the clown's face, twisted and angry. He heard his voice, demanding that he pick another card. And then, just as he was about to drift off, he heard a low, sinister laugh coming from his closet. Ben froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The laugh grew louder, followed by the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps moving closer to his bed. He pulled the covers over his head, praying that it was just his imagination. But then he felt a cold hand on his shoulder, the grip tight and unforgiving. Ben screamed, throwing off the covers and bolting out of his room. He ran to his parents' room, sobbing uncontrollably, but when they checked his room, there was nothing there. The closet was empty, the room silent, but Ben knew Mr. Jolly was still out there, waiting for the right moment to return. Story 3: The Forgotten Invitation. It was Lily's 13th birthday, a milestone she had been eagerly awaiting. She had planned a big sleepover party with all her friends, complete with movies, snacks, and plenty of gossip. The invitations had been sent out weeks in advance, and Lily had been counting down the days with excitement. But as the day of the party approached, she began to feel a strange sense of unease. It started with the phone calls. One by one, her friends called to cancel. Some had family emergencies, others were suddenly sick, and a few simply never showed up. By the time the party was supposed to start, only 2 of her friends had arrived. Lily was disappointed, but she tried to make the best of it, hoping that the night would still be fun. Her mother tried to cheer her up by baking her favorite cake and setting up a cozy movie night in the living room. As the 3 girls settled in for the night, the doorbell rang. Confused, Lily went to answer it, thinking maybe one of her friends had changed their mind. But when she opened the door, there was no one there, just a small, wrapped package sitting on the doorstep. The package was old and worn, the wrapping paper faded and torn in places. There was no note, no name, just a simple tag that read "Happy Birthday, Lily." Curious, Lily brought the package inside and opened it. Inside was a small, antique-looking doll, its porcelain face cracked and its dress tattered. The doll's eyes were a deep, unsettling shade of blue, and they seemed to follow Lily's every move. "That's creepy," one of her friends said, eyeing the doll with suspicion. The other girl nodded, clearly uncomfortable with the strange gift. Lily felt a chill run down her spine as she held the doll, but she shrugged it off, placing it on a shelf in the living room. "It's probably just from my aunt," she said. Though she didn't really believe it. Something about the doll felt off, but she didn't want to dwell on it. The night went on, and the girls tried to enjoy themselves, but the atmosphere was tense. Every creak of the house, every flicker of the lights made them jump. And then, as they were watching a movie, the doll fell from the shelf with a loud crash. Lily's heart skipped a beat as she stared at the doll lying on the floor. Its head had turned, and it was now facing the girls, its blue eyes staring directly at them. "Okay, that's enough," one of her friends said, getting up to leave. The other quickly followed, both of them too scared to stay. Lily was left alone, the doll still lying on the floor. She picked it up, intending to put it away, but as she did, she noticed something strange. There was a piece of paper sticking out of the doll's dress. She unfolded it, revealing a faded, handwritten note. "Don't forget me," the note read, in a shaky, almost childlike handwriting. Lily's blood ran cold. The handwriting was eerily similar to her own, but she had never seen the note before. That night, Lily tried to sleep, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. She could feel the doll's eyes on her, even though she had placed it in the closet, out of sight. The note kept replaying in her mind, "Don't forget me." As she lay in bed, she heard a soft rustling sound coming from the closet. She held her breath, too scared to move. The rustling grew louder, followed by a soft, shuffling noise like something small was moving around. Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she slowly turned to look at the closet. The door was slightly open, and in the darkness she could see the faint outline of the doll standing there, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She screamed, bolting out of her room and running to her parents. They searched her room, but the doll was nowhere to be found. The closet was empty, the note gone. But Lily knew what she had seen, knew that the doll was still out there, waiting. From that night on, strange things began happening in the house. Objects would move on their own, whispers echoed through the halls, and Lily often woke up to find her belongings rearranged. The doll never reappeared, but its presence lingered, a constant reminder that some things should never be forgotten.